Welcome to this episode of Horrific History and Hauntings. I'm Beth.
And I'm Ramy. We're your hosts, here to talk about the stories that the history books ignore.
From horrific epidemics and ghostly hauntings to the catastrophes and tragic events that have sickened humanity.
Yeah, there's a few of those. What happened today in history, Beth?
Well, before we get into that, we're going to be talking about the crash and hauntings of Eastern Airlines Flight 401. But do you know what tragic event in history happened today?
No, I don't Google it.
It's April 26th, and it happened in 1986.
Chernobyl?
Yes.
Oh, wow. I guess that because of the date, the year, not the date itself.
Yeah, I would not remember the actual date.
Oh,
yeah.
That was, a lot of people say it's the start of the fall of the Soviet Union.
32 people died and dozens more suffered from radiation poisoning in the immediate aftermath of this crisis. And days after the nuclear accident, Soviet authorities were forced to admit the disaster had happened when the Swedish picked up on the radioactive fallout.
Yeah, the people were picking up on it and thought that something else. They didn't know what was going on. They took longer to tell their own people than it took them to tell the world.
Yeah.
That was an issue.
On April 25th, 1986, engineers at Chernobyl tried a risky experiment on Reactor 4.
That's what you want to hear your people in charge of the reactor is doing.
Yeah. They wanted to see if the turbine could power emergency water pumps using leftover energy, but they didn't fully understand how reactors worked.
Well, they didn't understand how theirs worked. Theirs had graphite.
Yeah.
It was a state secret, so of course they wouldn't know.
Yeah. They disconnected the reactor's safety systems and power regulation systems, and then they made more mistakes by running the reactor at too low a power level, which caused instability. They also removed too many control rods to increase the power.
And then when they tried dropping them all, it exploded.
Yeah. At 1:23 a.m. on April 26th, they proceeded with the experiment. They shut down the turbine generator, and it didn't work as they expected. Without cooling the water, the reactor's power surged. To prevent meltdown, the operators quickly reinserted over 200 control rods into the reactor. They were supposed to dampen the reaction, but they had the flaw, which was graphite tips.
Yeah, graphite actually increased it for a bit.
Yes, it made it worse.
So the first thing, instead of cooling it off immediately when the rods are inserted, they increase the heat and the reaction.
Yep. It led to the explosion, which blew the reactor's lid. And in the following fire, over 50 tons of radioactive materials were released into the air.
And we still don't know exactly how many people have been hurt over this period of time. There could be more
estimates.
Yeah, because all we have is the few engineers and first responders who died on official record, I believe. That's all the Soviet Union kept track of, not the people who were infected later.
Yeah. On April 27th, Soviet authorities began evacuating the 30,000 people living nearby. They tried to hide what happened, and as I mentioned before, by April 28th, the radiation levels were 40% higher than usual that were detected by Swedish stations over 80 miles away from Chernobyl. And that's when the Soviets were like, you know what? It actually did happen. Yeah. There was a nuclear disaster.
It was Pripyat, the city that they evacuated.
It was what?
Pripyat.
Yes.
Pripyat, yeah. Now they've started kind of reopening. People can go and visit more often if you get official paperwork and all that stuff. It's interesting how things have worked out over there. Their neighboring country got really irradiated, but since it's still like the last dictatorship in Europe, there's no real science behind how badly it was affected. They just know that it's terribly affected.
It said that the radiation released into the atmosphere spread across northern and eastern Europe.
Yeah.
Around 5,000 Soviet citizens died from cancer and other illnesses caused by the radiation exposure. And it says millions more were suffering from health issues as well.
It's inevitable with that kind of radiation.
Yeah. This part I didn't know. In 2000, the remaining reactors at Chernobyl were shut down and the plant was officially closed.
They kept the other three working for a long time, obviously. I mean, that was expensive.
They were probably afraid to mess with it after that.
It became a big deal when Russia invaded Ukraine. The control over who held the abandoned reactors was kind of up in the air for a bit. I do believe I remember hearing stories of radiation levels increasing in the area for a while.
I want the big foot of radiation.
The elephant's foot?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nasty, nasty mess. They have images of it. I don't even know how they took images of it. That's a place I'm curious about, but don't Don't know if I want to go, especially not now that it's in a war-torn country, unfortunately.
Yeah.
We need to go into more detail about this one day. This would be
Yeah.
a great episode.
One day.
Mm-hmm. We can learn about how the Russians seeded the clouds so it rained on a small town before the radiated clouds got to Moscow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now what?
Now we're going to talk about Eastern Airlines Flight 401. Eastern Airlines Flight 401 departed JFK International Airport in New York on December 29th, 1972. It was headed to Miami, Florida, and was carrying 163 passengers and 13 crew members, including 55-year-old Captain Robert Loft and flight engineer Donald Repo.
It'd be awful awkward if it took off without them.
Yes.
Explain the crash a little better.
The flight proceeded smoothly until just before landing. That's when Robert Loft moved the landing gear handle down in preparation for landing, but the light indicating that the wheels were locked and ready for landing did not turn on.
Well, he don't know if they're on or off or just broken.
Yeah. The crew relied on this light to confirm that everything was working and the plane was ready to land. So he tried again and the light still didn't turn on. He immediately assumed that the landing gear was not working right, as one probably would.
That's what the light's for.
Yeah. They were told to turn around and had to repeat the landing process a few times, at least 3 that I know of, but they may have done it more.
Press the reset button.
They turned on the autopilot while the crew focused on resolving the problem, and while they were doing this, they were unaware that the autopilot had disengaged and the plane was descending steadily.
Oh, that's why you don't...
So nobody was there paying attention to the autopilot.
Well, in all fairness, they did have other problems to take care of at the moment.
True, but I think somebody should have stayed there.
If there's only one pilot and an engineer, who's going to do it then?
I don't know.
I don't... send the passengers. Someone needs to go see if the wheels are down, please.
They did send a crew member twice. The first time it was too dark. The second time, I guess it was still too dark. I don't know what was up, but he couldn't find or see anything.
It looks like you'd be able to hear if there was wind inside the bottom of the plane.
Yeah.
I don't know how planes work.
I don't know.
So, when do they fly, if you're lucky?
Yeah. Unfortunately, the plane crashed into the Everglades just 5 months after Eastern Airlines had purchased it.
Oh, what an unfortunate incident for the airlines, Beth.
Yes. It resulted in the loss of 101 lives. Some sources say 99 people were killed. The crash is a well-documented airplane disaster. It was blamed on mistakes made by the pilot. I don't agree with that completely. He was told to get glasses, but other than that, he apparently passed all the simulations and things like that. So,
and to be
and
honest,
as far as I know, he got the glasses.
Okay, then I mean, it's a light. It's either on or off.
Yes.
And if other people have seen that it's not on, then I believe him.
Yes. Well, I don't think it was the pilot's fault.
No.
In this case.
I don't either.
Another plane saw a flash, which was when the plane crashed, it caused an explosion.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
The plane that saw the flash reported it over the radio and said that they didn't know what it was.
When was this, the 80s?
72.
Oh, I'm pretty sure they could have blamed it on aliens.
The plane crashed in the swamp with about 6 to 12 inches of swamp water.
Oh, wow. They're just sitting there. And they're like, oh, the landing gear isn't working. Next thing you know, you're in a swamp.
When the plane hit the mushy mud, it forced it to go into a spinning motion. The way it was described, I think it was more like the plane was doing somersaults.
I thought you meant like a hydroplane. It's going around and around and around and around.
See, I thought that, but the way it was being described, it made me feel like it was doing somersaults.
Well, the fact anybody survived that, it's...
It caused the plane to break into even more pieces.
Well, yeah.
And caused luggage and people and other debris to be scattered all about.
At least they had like 6 inches of mud to catch them.
Yes. Days later, the aircraft wreckage was removed from the swamp. They found that the landing gear was down and locked, and that it was engaged before the crash. It turns out the only thing that was wrong was that the landing gear light indicator's bulb had blown.
Oh, that's before LEDs.
So that's why all this chaos and tragedy happened. And apparently the safety inspections, the plane passed all of them, but this one blown light caused it to crash and kill hundreds.
I would worry more about the disengaging autopilot.
Yeah.
That clearly didn't go as planned.
Yeah, they don't know, as far as I know. They think maybe somebody may have accidentally, like, nudged it or something and it turned it off, but they, as far as I could find, that's all when it came to that part.
I would make it like a door ajar sound. When you put the landing gear down, there's a buzz as well as a light. They both can't break as easily as just the one.
Yeah. The salvageable parts, including a galley, were retrieved.
Is this the one at the haunted microwave?
I think it's an oven.
Okay. I heard the story, but it was a microwave. There's like a face in my microwave.
Oh, the one I seen was it was an oven.
It makes more sense, but
Why would there be an oven on the plane, though?
food, Beth. You had a short flight and didn't get food, did you?
No.
There's food on longer flights.
For a full-on oven? I would just get
It was
you
the
some TV dinners
It
or
was the
something.
70s. I don't know when the microwaves became a big thing.
I don't know. The parts that were in good condition were said to be reused in the Eastern Airlines fleet. Eastern Airlines, believe, denies that.
Nobody wants to know they're riding on spare parts.
Yeah.
In the sky. On a plane that's already crashed.
Yeah. Some survivors found themselves still trapped in their seats. Some had been thrown from the plane, and they were left sitting or lying in the muddy swamp water that was now contaminated with the jet fuel because it had about 22 tons worth of jet fuel that had already
so it could have
leaked out.
It had plenty of time to fly around and figure out what had happened.
Yeah.
If the autopilot hadn't have broke.
Yeah, their fuel was not an issue. That's why they kept going around in circles trying to figure it out. Some said that they couldn't move while they laid there, and they had to just sit there or lay there hearing alligators and snakes and such splashing and moving around them.
To them, it must have been alarming.
That would have been terrifying if you can't move. And
I'd be more alarmed, though, by the
jet fuel.
Yeah.
There was a guy who happened to be teaching his friend how to hunt frogs.
That's a thing to find.
Yeah, he was out on his boat, and it was actually a moonless night that the plane crashed, so it was really dark, and all he had for light was his headlamp.
What is it called? Gigging?
Something like that, I believe, yeah.
I know we had a gig to catch frogs so long ago.
He saw the flash, so he ended up steering the boat towards that flash, and obviously he found the plane crash. He said when he turned off the boat engine, he heard moans turning into screams for help, and that all he could see was a bunch of twisted metal and bodies lying about.
The fires are still burning or had been put out, I wonder.
They, I believe, burned for a little while, but the swamp somehow ended up putting it out.
I'm not sure.
Far.
I'm not sure how mud and water would put out a fire.
I don't know, but that's what I seen. So
I just like to imagine it's just so dark now.
Yeah.
It's still less alarming than the fuel in the fire. So dark is better, in my opinion.
Yeah. So this guy, whose name was Bud, I believe, Bud or Buddy or something like that, he ended up trying to help these people and rescue them with his boat. And one man in particular, he said, was screaming that he couldn't hold his head up anymore because he was laying there and having to lift his head up, obviously exhausted because he was in a plane crash. And all he could do was try to hold his head up to keep from drowning. Bud, or whatever this guy with the boat's name was, hopped in the water full of jet fuel and pulled this man out before he drowned. I believe he also ended up helping when Coast Guard I believe it was the Coast Guard ended up showing up. He ended up using his boat to help get people out as well.
I'd say they're the ones that could have got there fastest.
Yeah.
It sounds like a horrible experience.
Yeah. The Coast Guard sent out helicopters, but as I mentioned, it was so dark they couldn't find the crash site until Bud, that was his name, he lifted his headlamp up towards the sky to help the helicopters see him.
So the fires had been out. Obviously.
Yeah, the fires at this point had been out. Captain Robert was found alive, but he was in terrible condition. He said he was going to die to the person that said, "Hold on, we're going to get help." And not long after, he did end up dying at the crash site.
Oh.
I want to say he was still in the cockpit as well.
I don't know. I'd say so. If that's the case, what was he looking at then? I guess it was dark. He couldn't see where he was. There's no headlights on these things, so.
No, it's all radar.
Yeah.
Remember our cousin's husband or something, I don't remember. He was getting his pilot's license, and then he freaked out when he realized they didn't have windshield wipers.
Yeah, that was the end of that, wasn't it?
To be fair, I would too.
Yeah, I can't blame him. You have to rely solely on the instruments most of the time.
Yeah, that's terrifying. This next part just shows how great humanity is. Several Florida locals arrived at the scene and started looting the bodies of the deceased. as the rescuers were there trying to help other people
We're
who
just
were
hunting
still
for
alive.
people.
Yeah.
Grab the Louis Vuitton.
Yeah. You walk all the way to a swamp to loot these bodies as other people are trying to help save the still living. So, wonderful people. Wonderful. The rescuers didn't have time to stop these looters as they were focused on aiding the survivors and providing medical attention and trying to get them out of the swamp.
Yeah.
So they just let them loot the bodies, which is kind of sad because, some of those were related that were still alive. Once the bodies of the deceased began sinking into the water and mud, it was easier to find the rest of the survivors. There were 77 survivors by the next day. Some sources said 75, so in between there, I guess.
The ones who didn't make it.
Yeah. By December 31st, they had found the last body. They found it because a hand was sticking up and out of the water and mud.
I can just imagine how difficult that would be to find everything. A plane doing cartwheels.
That's awful. It's terrifying.
Yeah.
Some survivors who were still hospitalized at this time learned that they might have contracted a life-threatening infection from the mud that helped save them at the crash site by clogging the wounds in the swamp.
Their wounds.
That's what I said.
You said the runes.
The mud clogged it, but it also
infected
caused some of them to have this life-threatening infection.
Swamp fever.
Well, I guess. I don't know. One of the flight attendants who was supposed to work on that flight began having nightmares before about a plane crash during a time with Christmas presents and decorations. And she told some of her friends and family and coworkers about it. And this creeped out some of her coworkers. Her and I want to say 2 or 3 others decided not to go on that particular shift. She said that the last one she remembered was a hand that was slowly disappearing, which is weird because that's how they found the last body.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Survivors and locals have shared eerie experiences near the crash site, including distant flickering lights, mysterious sounds in the trees, sightings of ghostly figures resembling the passengers and crew members who died in the crash, including the spirits of Captain Robert Loft and flight engineer Donald Repo.
Huh. I was going to say, I feel bad for those two scurrying around trying to figure out if your landing gear's down and then you crash.
Yeah. On one flight, a captain was asked to check on a passenger who was wearing a pilot's uniform in the first class. The senior flight attendant mentioned that the passenger seemed dazed and unresponsive and wasn't listed on the passenger list. The captain checked it out and reportedly recognized him as Captain Robert Loft. A flight attendant on a New York to Miami flight, which happened to be the same route as Flight 401 that crashed in December 1972, she allegedly opened an overhead locker to find Robert's face looking back at her.
That might be what I've heard. I swear
Maybe.
the video, it's probably just the reenactment I seen.
Yeah.
Had a microwave with a face in it.
Yeah. Either one would be creepy, but yeah.
Yeah. I laughed. I remember laughing. I went to get my turkey TV dinner and then there's a face in my microwave.
Oh, like the Pennywise.
Oh, yeah.
With the head in the fridge.
Yeah.
Another flight attendant reportedly spotted Dawn's face on the oven door on another flight. There you go. She called 2 fellow crew members to witness what she saw. Allegedly, the face then uttered, "Watch out for fire on this plane." A few days later, a small fire broke out in the cockpit of that very same plane.
There's light bulbs. Somebody needs to do something about that.
Repo appeared again to another Eastern Airline employee, which is said to be the last report of him appearing. He reassured them that they would never allow another crash to happen on an Eastern Airlines plane.
Did Eastern Airlines stay in business? I'm not a big plane
No.
enthusiast. Okay.
One of the first reports of a ghostly encounter after the crash was from the vice president of Eastern Airlines. He was taking the same type of plane, and he noticed he was sitting next to a pilot, which he claimed to realize that it was Captain Loft.
A lot of people recognize this dude.
Mm-hmm. He said he looked sad while watching out the window before he vanished completely. And after searching, nobody could find the man.
I would have never reported it. No one at this company went under.
There was a point when so many of the employees of Eastern Airlines kept reporting seeing the deceased captain that Eastern Airlines began telling the employees to never speak about it.
Of course. They might have stayed in business if they just started a ghost flight.
Yeah. Well, maybe.
Oh, now, today, you would certainly make business.
Well, yeah.
You'd be doing good. A ghost-themed flight across the country.
Yeah. There was also a passenger who was taking a flight, and she saw a man next to her that vanished right before her eyes. A flight attendant she had told about her experience showed her a group of photos of Eastern Airline pilots, and the woman pointed out the second officer, Donald Repo. During a different flight from New York to Miami, a man's voice came over the intercom while the plane was over the Everglades, instructing passengers to fasten their seatbelts for landing. It was later revealed that none of the flight crew had made that announcement.
That would alarm me.
I feel like they're just trying to keep people safe at this point.
Yeah.
Still creepy, but
I don't see it as a problem.
Yeah.
I don't know if it had a hand in their whole business going under, though.
They actually couldn't keep up with competition, lower prices for flying. So in 1991, Eastern Airlines went out of business.
Well, they lasted a couple decades.
Mm-hmm. That's my short little episode. Mom actually recommended this one.
Yeah, there's a book about this, I'm sure of it. I'm 100% sure. I have an old book that my grandma used to read.
And I'm sure there's other stuff that I could have put in here, but I don't know much about planes, and I just did not feel like trying to explain something I know nothing about.
I've been there.
I tried to do that with the bridge engineering one, and it's just not fun for me. But I know nothing about the engineering of planes or engineering in general, so I just chose to skip that part. Maybe you can find another podcast that can explain that that area a little better than me.
Look up like documentaries about this, because I just want someone else to enjoy the face in the microwave scene.
But I figured,
oh no, it's
fine. The light bulb that is pretty much all I needed to tell you. It was a blown light bulb.
Yeah, that's terrifying.
It may have just been spinning, but the way I read it, it seemed like
it went to nose first and then head over heel, over and over and over. Yeah, that makes more sense than hydroplaning. I'm sure there's trees in between here and there. If it wasn't, that was lucky. I mean, if there was no trees, I say it would kept the plane in.
I'm sure there were trees.
Yeah, that's probably why it split a billion pieces. That didn't help any. Let's hope I'll never get in a situation like that. I'm not a flyer, so I don't know.
I'm not really afraid of the plane itself. I just really don't like airport security touching me. I don't want to be touched.
I could handle that. I could fly. I could do it. If I was going somewhere I really wanted to go, I could do it.
I mean, I understand why they have to do it. I get it completely. Of course, you need to do it. But still, I personally just do not feel comfortable letting strangers touch me.
Yeah.
So if I have to fly, if I'm going out of the country, then obviously I will fly. If I can't take a boat.
You could take a cruise across to Europe.
Yeah, I would rather take the cruise. But
I don't know how much cheaper it'd be.
I don't care. But if it's in the country, even if it's on the other side of the country, I will do a road trip, mostly because it's more fun to do a road trip too. You get to see other places and stop at interesting spots along the way.
Look up some more about that cloud seeding that Russia did and see if you can find any information about the after effects of Chernobyl in other countries. That'd be a good episode just to, talk about how that worked out. Because that was awful. They just literally radiation bombed a whole group of people.
But I feel like that's one of those that's going to take me a while to do. And I'm still working on John Wayne Gacy. If it's going to take me a long time, I like to have a lot of time to do it.
Oh, understandable. Okay. Well, if you like what you heard here, we're part of the Gruesome Gaming Group Podcast Network. We have 2 other podcasts, one called Leveling Duo. It only comes out whenever me and Beth or me and my friend Dakota find a new video game we really enjoy, and we'll talk about that video game. If you subscribe, you'll get a notification whenever a new episode does come out. And if you want to listen to me tell my sister here about tabletop role-playing games, we have Brother Knows Quest. Yeah. And we can find all those in the link in the description. It'll be a Linktree link, and it will take you to all of our other links. Most of our other links, they're mostly social links. And the first one on that tree will be our main website where it'll have all our other podcasts. You can subscribe and find us, sample them there. And all the other links on there is socials. You can subscribe to them, reach out to us using them if you want, message us, leave comments on stuff, keep up to date with the things we've come out with. All that will work through there. And if you want to email us, below the Linktree link will be our 2 emails, one for me and one for Beth, or just email whichever one you feel comfortable with, and it will go between the 2 of us. That's how it works. It'll just, if something comes to me for Beth, then I'll send it to Beth. And then below that's an option to send us a little tip or donation, something to help keep the podcast hosted. That's appreciated. And if you want to keep leaving reviews and stuff for us on whatever episode or podcast app you have or YouTube, or just leave a comment on YouTube, do that. We have been collecting them. We'll have a whole episode where we just talk about stuff people said about us, even if it's not great. And I guess that's it. You have anything else to say, Beth?
No.
All right. Thank you for listening. I've been Ramey.
And I'm Beth.
And it's been HH&H. Bye-bye.